Hi, Kevin Lenz here, pastor, Trinity Badger Ranch. Thank you for joining me for my Monday devotion. I'm going to do a quick sermon recap of what I preached yesterday in the two worship services. The text was from Luke chapter 7. We'll get to that in a minute. But I began by talking about the fact that sometimes enough is enough. Everything has its limits. You can have enough food and got to push it away, or you got to have enough miles traveling, like I got to rest, or whatever the case might be. But most everything in life has its breaking point. And that kind of comes up in today's gospel reading, or yesterday's gospel reading. I began by talking about miracles because they're so important and they're used in so many different ways. Like I joked about, we're familiar with Miracle Whip, or there are songs with the word miracle or miracles in the title. There are also the Miracle on Ice, the Olympic hockey story of 1980, the men's team. So we're familiar with the word miracles. So I decided, since there's so many ways to use it, let's look at the definition of it. And the definition is extraordinary and astonishing happening that is attributed to the presence and action of an ultimate or divine power. Long definition. But the point that's made is that things that go beyond the laws of nature, things we can't do, but things that God has done and is still doing in our lives today. We know about the miracles recorded in Scripture, Old Testament, New Testament, God showing His power. And again, we can't conduct any of those things. And we give thanks that God is indeed so very powerful. But the reason I talked about miracles was because Jesus used miracles to give evidence and proof as to who He was as the Messiah. The text for yesterday was from Luke chapter 7. Jesus said to John's disciples, because John was in prison, "Tell John what you've seen and heard. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor." So Jesus was, through John's disciples, telling John, who was starting to doubt about Christ maybe, because he asked the question, are you the one who was to come, or should we expect someone else? Because he was in prison and he was a pretty good guy, pretty important character to Jesus, but things were going well for him right now. So he had the disciples ask, are you indeed the Messiah? And Jesus doesn't say yes or no to his yes, no question. Instead, he gives proof. What I just read from Luke 7, all the miracles he did, the blind receive sight, the deaf hear, the lame walk, and so on. So we give thanks that Jesus used himself as evidence or proof that he was who he said he was. I am the Son of God. I am God. I am the one who was promised to come into the world and save and redeem people. So we give thanks that he showed that he was God. Not through just wonderful teachings and preachings, which we can do. We can use words. He did things we cannot do by those wonderful miracles again and again. And there's a place in John chapter 10. I read it again. It's too long to read right now, but he proved himself in John chapter 10 again and again, saying more or less like, I get it. You don't like me. That's fine. That's who you are. But how can you deny the miracles? How can you say that I am not the Messiah when I've shown the power of God by what I have conducted? And so we give thanks that we have those miracles recorded for us in Scripture, because we believe they happen because they're Scripture themselves. So we give thanks that Jesus showed himself to be who he said he was through wonderful, non-human but godly powers, miracles. Talked also about the greatest miracle of all time, which is the one we pay the most attention to, is resurrection from the dead. Through it, death was defeated, life is ours, we'll be heaven bound. It was a fantastic miracle because the last enemy, death, was overcome. And we give thanks for that, because we too will overcome death because of our faith in him. So again, it's just more or less, John the Baptist was struggling, asked, is Jesus, are you the Messiah? Jesus answered him by saying, yes, I've done all these things to prove it. And we give thanks that those things are still proven to us. And we believe what Scripture teaches, including the miraculous powers of Christ. So thanks for joining me here today. If you're able to join us again on Sunday, we have wonderful worship at 8:30 and 10:30. Kids taking part in 10:30, and hymns and carols at 8:30. So consider it if you're in town. So God bless. Bye-bye.